All right, let's move on to the back. So what we need to do is grab our back pieces. So for the back side and the back center, grab all of your pattern pieces and just get them all together. So we should have 2 back sides and 1 back main. And what we need to do is line up our back sides with either side of our back main piece. And we need to place them with the wrong sides together because we're going to continue making flat felled seams. Hopefully you're not sick of flat felled seams yet, but what's really nice is the back pieces and the back sides have notches. Hopefully you cut them when you cut your fabric, but we need to align the notches with the notches, and we're doing wrong sides together. So let's clip wrong sides together. And we want the main back piece to be the piece that's on top. So you can see the way I'm clipping. We want the main full back piece on top. And let's do that for the other side too. So wrong sides together. Back piece facing up. All right, now you know the drill. This is not your first rodeo with flat fell seams. So what we're going to do is stitch right here along the sides at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and we want the top stitching on this back panel. So we want that and we want that. Okay, so let's stitch both sides and take care of that. Then we'll come back and we'll figure the rest out together. We've just done our flat fell seams. Now let's do some pressing. Press everything on the wrong side. Get it nice and flat, crisp. Press on this side. Flip it over to the right side now. And we want to press the seam allowance. Well, actually, first of all, we need to trim. We didn't trim. Let's trim this flat fell seam. So we don't want to trim the back seam allowance. So that would be this side. What we need to trim instead is the back side seam allowance. So the sides on the end, outside sides. Okay, so let's give it a nice little trim in half. You know the drill. You are a pro. I use my bigger scissors here. Sometimes the little ones are a little bit better. Other times you just want a little bit of a larger scissor to cut. Get that scrap out of the way. Do the same thing on the other side. When I get this seam allowance clipped down. Now let's do a little bit of pressing. Press that seam over to the side. This is where having a contrasting fabric as your like back center panel, it would be so pretty. So if you are doing a color blocked option, it would just look so nice. Okay, so now we need to finish these flat fell seams, pressing everything over, pinning it in place, and then top stitching, as you've come to know how to do and love. Hopefully love. I really love flat fell seams, but I know I've said that already. You're probably getting tired of me saying it. And remember, if you need to trim any of these little raw edge bits off, you can. You can always do that. You can also pin to keep everything down and where you want it. Okay, and now repeat that for the other side. And remember to top stitch at an 1/8 inch seam allowance once this is all finished. I need to trim my seam allowance down a little bit. All right, go to town top stitching. Okay, moving right along. We have finished our flat fell seams for the back piece. Now grab your back yoke pattern piece, flip your back wrong side up, and now place your back yoke with the wrong sides together, and your notches should all align with seams or other notches. So the notch here aligns with this flat fell seam on the front. Center back notch should align with the center back notch, and it does. And this notch with the on the yoke should align with the other flat fell seam. So just clip or pin these in place, the wrong sides together. Okay, once we've done that, we need to stitch with the back yoke piece on top. And we want to stitch with a 5/8 inch seam allowance because we want our top stitching here on the top of the yoke. And then we'll come back, we'll trim the seam, and then we'll do the rest of the flat fell seam that you are used to doing. All right, so we've just finished sewing the back yoke. You should be really happy with how everything is coming together. What you will need to do now, as we move on to the shoulders part, are grab your back pieces and your front pieces that we've assembled so far. And we are going to start by sewing a French seam and putting these shoulders together. So what we want to do is put our wrong sides together, as we have been doing with these flat fell seams, not French seams, not for this pattern. But we want to put our wrong sides together and align the shoulders. Using a 5/8 inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch up everything. We're going to trim, press, and then do that top stitching to get that lovely flat fell seam look that we've been doing, continuing with that in this video. Hopefully you're seeing that these flat fell seams are actually pretty easy to put together. You're not scared off by them or anything. Okay, so go ahead and stitch them 5/8 inch seam allowance right across the top. And we want to make sure that we top stitch with the fronts on top. So make sure your top stitching thread is stitching along the top here. And I'll go sew that. I'm not going to take footage of it, but we'll come back and we'll continue. Okay, you know what to do. Go ahead and trim the back seam allowance in half. Only the back seam. And then we're gonna press everything and fold it over and do that final row of top stitching, just like we've been doing for all of the flat fell seams that have come before. All right, go ahead and get started on your pressing. I just wanted to point out that I have ironed and folded over my flat fell seam, and now I'm just going to do that top stitching on both sides of the shoulders.